Fisher Tiger was able to raid the Holy Land and free the Celestial Dragon's slaves, but this doesn't make any sense. We've later learned that the Celestial Dragons are basically one of the strongest factions in all of One Piece. The Holy Land is the home of basically dozens of fighters stronger than Fisher Tiger, like the Five Elders and the God's Knights. These characters are all literally immortal and cannot even be damaged by most things in the story. We've at this point even seen these Celestial Dragons go to battle with some of the strongest pirates in the entire world, where Fisher Tiger is practically a peasant in comparison. It is incredibly hard to believe that he of all characters was able to attack Mariejois and live. Tiger is the same man who later died from injuries he got from fighting random marines led by a rear admiral. Compare this to the God's Knights, who are just able to walk over one of the strongest vice admirals, or the actual elders, who are literally able to do battle with the Yonko. So, how exactly was a weakling like Fisher Tiger, without any backup, able to invade the Holy Land, set fire to the Celestial Dragons' homes, and run away with literally thousands of their slaves? I have some ideas. This is actually not the only time in the story someone attacked the Holy Land. The Revolutionary Army commanders also did this during the reverie, when they were trying to rescue Kuma, and Kuma later by himself flew back and attacked the place on his own. We've also discovered that Emmet the robot raided the Holy Land 200 years ago. What is very interesting is that in all of these instances, the Celestial Dragons did barely anything to defend their home. When the revolutionaries and Kuma attacked, it was not the Celestial Dragons, but the Marines who dealt with the attackers. The Celestial Dragons simply stood on the sidelines, mocking the Marines for doing a bad job dealing with the invaders. When Emmet attacked them, he was also not stopped by the Celestial Dragons, but by his own power source coincidentally turning off. Literally the only fighting the Celestial Dragons themselves have ever done to defend the Holy Land was against Sabo, and this was only after Sabo himself snuck right into their throne room and literally tried to assassinate both Imu and the Elders. In all of the cases where the Holy Land gets attacked, the Celestial Dragons are incredibly passive and do next to nothing. Every time something like this happens, they simply expect the Marines and Cypher Pole to do all their fighting for them, and the thought of the Celestial Dragons defending themselves literally never comes up. This is despite the fact that the Elders and God's Knights are all super powerful in their own right, and they are almost always seen being in the Holy Land. I think this could however also be a possible clue as to why they don't do their own fighting. Basically, they might just think that fighting invaders is something beneath them. Almost all of the Celestial Dragons have the same god complex, where they are incredibly lazy and arrogant, and want their servants to do all of their work for them. This has been clear since their introduction, where they don't even bother walking, but literally ride on the backs of their slaves. To the Celestial Dragons, everyone who is not them is an insect. Therefore, it could make a lot of sense that they would consider fighting these creatures to not be a task suited for gods such as them. Still, while it's somewhat interesting, I don't actually buy this theory, as it is not exactly accurate to the story. There have been several scenes in One Piece where the Celestial Dragons personally attack regular people, and they don't usually even do it out of self-defense, but out of simple sadistic pleasure. This is for example what happened to Sabo in Luffy's flashback, where a Celestial Dragon personally shot him just because he was in the way of his ship. But even more importantly, the Elders and the God's Knights clearly don't have a problem dirtying their hands fighting criminals, even if those criminals are really strong. The Five Elders were all willing to fight an Emperor of the Sea and his crew on Egghead, and the God's Knights arguably did them one better, where they were ready to fight both the Rocks Pirates and the Roger Pirates at God Valley. So, if the Celestial Dragons have no problems going to town with some of the strongest pirates in the world, why do they then not lift a finger when a much weaker character like Fisher Tiger is literally attacking their home? What Fisher Tiger did in their eyes was apparently unforgivable. Simply attacking one Celestial Dragon is already viewed as an incident of historic proportions. But what Fisher Tiger did was clearly far worse, as he became known as the worst criminal in the world for raiding Mariejois. By the way, I looked this up, and this is actually a mistranslation, where the original Japanese just calls Tiger Daihan Shueisha, which just means major criminal. So yeah, Fisher Tiger wasn't actually Dragon's predecessor, if that's what some of you were thinking. I do have an alternate explanation for this video, which is that the reason the Celestial Dragons don't personally defend the Holy Land could be because they do not want to reveal their true powers to the world. The Five Elders and the God's Knights all possess special powers that are extremely abnormal, even by the standards of the One Piece world. Being able to do things like regenerate and teleport are not abilities that obey any of the known rules of this setting, and we've seen that basically every character who fights the Celestial Dragons has no idea what powers they're using. These are all abilities seemingly granted to the Celestial Dragons by Imu, so it could make a lot of sense that they would want to keep them hidden. Imu himself is incredibly paranoid about the world discovering anything about his existence, and this paranoia could extend to him not wanting the world to know about his powers. If and when an enemy attacks the Holy Land, the Celestial Dragons might simply have their hands tied, where Imu could have literally forbidden them to fight, because of the risk of any possible survivors telling the entire world about his powers. This is arguably a theory backed up by the canon story. When Saint Saturn got ready to fight on Egghead Island, he forbade all the lower-ranking Marines from seeing him, and even executed one of the Marines for simply looking at him in his transformed state. All the regular Marines at Egghead also had no idea what they were looking at when the Elders used their abilities, and it is apparently only Marines ranked Commodore and higher who know that the Celestial Dragons possess these abnormal powers. This was later reconfirmed in the Elbaf arc, where Saul, who is a former Vice Admiral, knew that the God's Knights were immortal. So yeah, this could basically be the reason why the Celestial Dragons don't personally defend the Holy Land, where they don't want to risk the world witnessing their powers. But I don't think even this explains why they didn't beat Fisher Tiger or the other invaders. In reality, the Celestial Dragons should be more than strong enough to defend the Holy Land even without using their special powers. The God's Knights on Elbaf have defeated far stronger characters than Tiger with just their basic abilities, and I really can't imagine someone like Saint Ethan even needing to transform to be able to beat someone like him. This is not even mentioning the fact that the Holy Land also seemingly houses a lot of other really strong world government characters who aren't even Celestial Dragons, like CP0 agents or Commander-in-Chief Kong, who is the leader of the government's entire military. This also debunks another possible theory, where maybe, when Fisher Tiger attacked, most of the Celestial Dragons could have been away on one of their native hunting competitions, explaining how Fisher Tiger was able to breach their security. But really, the presence of these other strong characters in the Holy Land debunks even this theory. To be fair, this theory wouldn't have been possible either way, because it would have broken the timeline, where the native hunting competition is something that happens every 3 years. I did the math on this, where Fisher Tiger's raid happened when Hancock was 16. Since Hancock is now 31, this would mean that the raid happened 15 to 16 years ago, which also means that the next native hunting competition in the timeline would have happened only a year or two after Fisher Tiger's attack. What this means is that Fisher Tiger by himself attacked the Holy Land when it was at full strength, which in retrospect is just nuts. I genuinely don't even think Roger could have by himself taken on all these insane fighters present in the Holy Land. So really, while Fisher Tiger's incursion might have made some sense when it was first brought up in Amazon Lily, the more we've learned about both Tiger's own strength and the strength of these Holy Land characters, it's pretty much impossible not to see this event as anything other than a plot hole. Fisher Tiger just surviving the Holy Land is also just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how little sense this part of the story makes. For one, the world government did barely anything to bring Tiger to justice after the event. He still managed to be an active pirate for years after the incident, and the government also gave him an incredibly small bounty of 230 million berry. To the government, Pecoms is a bigger target than the man who invaded their sacred home. There's also another plot hole adjacent to this, where Kuma says that Luffy at Sabaody was the first person who dared attack a Celestial Dragon in hundreds of years, which is seemingly a contradiction to what we were told about Fisher Tiger, and Hancock even literally compared Luffy to him. In my opinion, even though there's no solid explanation for this is nothing that unusual for the One Piece story. The world government has for a long time now become more incompetent with every passing arc, and this has been the case long before we even heard about Fisher Tiger. At this point, the only way the One Piece story genuinely makes sense is that the government is simply stupid. So Fisher Tiger managing to raid Mariejois is actually oddly consistent. Personally, this is why I actually really like the theory of there being a traitor among the elders. If all this time there had actually been someone inside the government sabotaging them from within, One Piece's entire plot would all of a sudden make so much more sense. Until then though, I at least can't think of any good justification for Fisher Tiger and all of these other characters being able to successfully raid the Holy Land. I however also don't think it somehow makes revelations like the Elders being strong or the God's Knight's introduction to the story not work. This is simply a problem the story has had from long ago, where I think the bridge was already burnt years before the final saga. I don't mind it that much. It's not exactly an easy job writing a decades-long epic at a weekly pace. These things just happen. A big thank you to all my members for allowing me to plunder their wallets. But if you also want to access my stash of members-only content, click the join button and I'll add you to my ledger of looted civilians. This was a bit of a shorter video while I'm working on bigger content for the channel. Really appreciate you guys for watching it all the way to the end. Have a nice day.